Welcome to the Freedom Fridays podcast. With me, your host, Pete Clark, the Whispers guy. Work seems to expand to the time that we give it. And I've been investing my time, occasionally on a Friday, to explore how we use our time, our energy, our attention, and the impact it has on our identity. I've been exploring over season 1 some of the mindset shifts in the handcuffs of I have to the freedom of I choose to. And I've shared some conversations, some tips, some tools about how you might want to invest your own time, your own energy, your own attention. How you might want to, if you choose to, make some changes to your identity. How you might have freedom from I have to and design a life around I choose to. If that's of interest to you, then this is the podcast for you. In season 2, I'm going to be exploring some experts and asking them what freedom means for them. And trying to help people work to live and not live to work. Trying to help people add life to their years and not just years to their life. So let's dive on in, and here's season 2. Welcome to this week's episode of the Freedom Fridays podcast, where my guest this week is a podcaster, an entrepreneur, and a newly formed author, and all sorts of things. So Melissa Marsden, welcome to the podcast. Thanks
very much for having me, Pete.
You're welcome. It's been a while in the making. You've had a few things go on in between our chats. So congratulations on the birth of your new child.
Thank you. Thank you.
You've now got the magic number of 3, rounds out the triangle.
I do, and I was lucky enough to close it out with a boy after having 2 girls. So it's been really lovely.
Cool. Well, thank you again for making the time, because I know we've got 3 kids, but a bit older. It can be a little bit hectic when you've now got 3.
Yes, it's an interesting challenge. We've got one at daycare, one at primary school, and then of course the little one, he's now 4 months old. So it's an interesting juggle in the morning to get everyone out the door, including myself, ready and ready for the day.
Yeah. We found that those that kind of before school time and after school time are the most hectic.
Yeah, absolutely.
Anyways, so maybe this will give you, 40 minutes of freedom.
Yes.
So Melissa, again, thank you for your time. As I said to you offline, we start this by a very broad question. In the work that you do, or with your customers and clients, what does freedom mean?
It's a very interesting question, and I'm going to start by answering it in the fact that freedom is actually one of my values. And the reason that I have freedom as one of my values is because what I realized over time was that freedom is something that I think is very important to each of us. And a lot of that comes down to choice and having the ability to choose how we spend our time, with whom we spend our time, and what do we want to do with our lives. And what I started to notice was really the opposite of freedom. It was when I felt stressed, burnt out, under pressure. It was really because I felt like my ability to choose, and therefore my ability to, have my own personal freedom, was being taken away from me. So, program deadlines, project deadlines, client issues, those sorts of things, anything that sort of constricts or constrains you is a result of a lack of freedom. So that's kind of where I realized that freedom was such an important value for me. And when I first sat down and did my value set, I realized that was in there. And it was actually when I'm really big into personality profiling, and there was a comment that was in one of my personality profiles, and it described me as a fox. And this is the analogy that it used was, if you box a fox into a corner, the first thing they do is come out fighting. And I went, that's exactly it. Like I get shitty, you come out fighting because feel like you're being boxed in. And that's when it really struck home for me that freedom was something that I really valued. And since I've gone through that exercise and had it there, I had it as my 5th value. I actually realized now it's actually my number 1 value. And what's happened as a result of that realization is that I've shifted my business model. I've shifted the way that I operate my day, my week. everything has really transformed in a way that I feel like I am working towards creating more freedom for myself as time goes on. So that's how important it's become for me personally. And it's something that I'm starting to notice far more prevalently in the work that I do with my clients as well. So as a workplace strategist and commercial workplace designer, you know, off the back of pandemic and everything else that's happened, everyone else has realized that we really all want this choice. We want to choose when we work. We want to choose how we work, who we work for, and have a lot more responsibility around how we structure our days. And that is what I'm starting to see far more prevalently with the clients we're working with and their employees as well.
Well, there's, as I've always found when I've done these conversations, there's so many places we could go just in the opening comments. So I'm going to go a couple of places first. Like you, freedom is one of my values. And I did this, well, you probably heard of Stephen Covey, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. It's a bit of a Bible in our world. Part of the program that I did, this will be way late 90s, was to choose your values. And interestingly, I've done subsequent ones and it hasn't shown up, but I do remember the 4 Fs, family, friends, fun, and freedom, as being my significant values. Now I've done other ones like you, values exercises, but they don't quite show up as exactly as that, but that's always stuck with me as being something that I held true. So I'm going to ask you a couple of questions. When did you decide freedom was number 5, for example? When did it come onto your list? And how is that, the freedom from, how has that shifted from freedom from what when it was number 5 and freedom from what that it's now number 1?
Okay, so freedom came onto my radar, it would have been about 4 or 5 years ago when I went and I really started to get deep into this, because I was trying to work out what I wanted to do with my business and where I fitted into that. And that's where this kind of, you know, and really the positioning that I wanted to take with how I wanted to put my brand out there. So that's where the whole concept initially started. And I was also doing some leadership work. I was on the board of the Entrepreneurs Organization in the Brisbane chapter, and we did some work around value sets there as part of our leadership journey. And that's when it really became obvious to me that freedom was in that top 5. What happened as a result of that, though, is I had brought my awareness to the need for that freedom. And I started to realize where all of those pain points were in my business and in my life that were a result of not having the freedom that I desired. So what that then did was I started to notice those things and I went, okay, well, I don't want to do that anymore. And I don't want to do that anymore. And some of those things are, you know, I, as a business owner, have the workplace strategy and design firm. So community is my business baby. And we deliver workplace experiences and, you know, complete workplace environments to our clients. That's a heavily project-driven world where there is lots of stress, lots of pressure, lots of deadlines, lots of external demands, things that are constantly outside of your control that you have to manage and deal with. And that was a big thing that was taking away my freedom. And so what I've started to do is I then began to shift my business around, well, what are the types of projects that we want to do? Who are the types of clients that we want to work with? And what parts of the project do we actually want to be working on? And, you know, the delivery end of a project is very stressful and you're at the beck and call of everybody else, which takes away any freedom because you no longer have the choice to determine when you can go on holidays, when you have your meetings, you know, any of those things get removed. So what I started to do was I became much more selective over the projects that we were going to be taking on, but also what our role within those projects was going to be. So that in doing so, I could then actually control far more how my time was being used, when it was being used, when I was needing to attend meetings, all of those sorts of things. And so progressively, that's how it's then enabled to show up in my business. I've been able to shift my focus to be more on my terms as opposed to being responsive to the terms and conditions of the external factors that go with those projects. Yeah.
So you're not saying, I think, and because I'm interested in this, you're not saying freedom doesn't mean responsibility.
No, absolutely not. Freedom is still responsibility. It's just about choosing where you're going to be responsible.
And that, I think many entrepreneurs feel this as well. The shift from their terms to my terms. That's, you know, that's a goal, I think, for many entrepreneurs. How long did that take?
Still a work in progress. You know, I'm delivering construction projects at the moment as we speak. So what it has enabled me to do, though, is be very choosy about those projects. So I have 3 projects that are in construction that I'm personally managing at the moment, but they are 3 projects that I would choose again to be involved with.
Right.
And it just means that we are being more conscious of that. And I think, you know, and that again is freedom. It's having the ability to choose. I chose to work on these projects, so therefore I have to accept the conditions with which that they come with. But it also enables me to look at other options. And, you know, I've also then explored the online world and creating online programs to then create further freedom and flexibility.
Right.
That hasn't worked as well for me because I think there is a whole new raft of challenges, and being a consultant in a corporate world, you know, similar to yourself, there's only so much that you can deliver from an online program versus an engaged consultative process. So it's limited, I think, in certain capacities, depending on, you know, the world and the industry in which you operate, as to whether or not you can create a very successful and a whole business around a purely online program. Sort of, it's a secondary piece. It's not the whole business. Yeah.
And so this freedom, and I'm hearing you use, certainly at the start of our conversation, a lot of, it's a choice. When is it okay not to choose? Because I guess, you know, the roles that we all have, you know, you're an author, you're a podcaster, you're an entrepreneur, you're a mum, you might have probably a partner, you've probably got some friends and family. And maybe I'm just reflecting my own position. I feel a little bit of obligation sometimes, a responsibility to be the dad, the partner, the friend, the consultant, you know, blah, 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 blah. So to some degree, I don't have freedom in its purest sense. I'm not, and I don't know if I want to be completely free from that responsibility. I quite like it. I want to, I kind of choose to have that responsibility. And I guess maybe this is my struggle, is getting that balance right of the over-indexing of over choosing and over responsibility with under choosing and under responsibility. And I'm kind of just throwing things out there at the top of my head. Does that resonate in any way, or any comments about the over or the under choosing?
Absolutely. I think, you know, as parents and as partners, there is a responsibility and an obligation that you take on when you take on those roles and those positions. And I think that also comes back to your value set, but also where you prioritize your time. And, you know, understanding that, you know, the thing that I kind of am reflecting on, and again, as I said, this is a work in progress for me, as I'm sure it is with many people, is that right now I have a 4-month-old baby. And so
there's no freedom there.
There's no freedom. Zero freedom. But that's a choice that I made. But that also means that there are things that have to give in other ways. So I'm probably not doing as much on the work front that I would have done pre a 4-month-old baby. You know, so I think there has to be some flexibility, and there's give and take. And, you know, I like to think about it as in the seasons and cycles of life. We go through different seasons. You know, the season that I am is very different to the season that you're in, with, you know, your children in their early 20s versus a 4-month-old, but that then comes with it different responsibilities, different enablements of time, different priorities, and that allows you then to make different choices about how you want to spend your time and where you choose to put that. Similarly for me, I'm choosing to spend as much time as I can with my newborn son, but I also thoroughly enjoy the work that I do and contributing back to the lives of the people that I get to touch through the work that I do. Yeah. And so it's about working out, well, what's a fair exchange of my time to those people versus my family and my husband and everyone else that's around me, and what does that structure look like, and how do I manage that?
It strikes me as you're talking, and forgive me, I'm going to be judgmental on us both here for a second. And so you might not feel this, but I feel this sometimes. I feel very privileged that I'm able to be in the space that I'm in, the house that I'm in. I run my own business, and whilst we know as entrepreneurs and business owners that can be very challenging, but it's a different sort of challenge than if if I'm renting and I've only got a job and I feel I have to turn up, because if I don't turn up, I don't get paid, and literally I'm going from bill to bill. And you and I talk about freedom and choice, and I'm sure there are people listening and go, I've got no choice. I've got no freedom here. How would you, is it even possible to plant a seed that, despite the constraints that that person might feel, is there any freedom in that? Is there any choice in that?
It's a really good question. And I agree with you. It is a very privileged position from which I speak, because I have made the opportunity to have my own business, which does give me that flexibility and freedom. On the flip side, as many other entrepreneurs will know, that's total rubbish at the same time.
Yeah.
Flexibility and freedom certainly isn't handed to you without running your own business. It's the dream you aspire to, but it doesn't quite work out that way.
Yeah, totally.
But I think from that perspective of having a job and not having the feeling of not having a choice, I can definitely resonate with that. I have been in that situation as well. And that is why I made the decisions and the choices to start my own business, so that I was working on my own terms.
Yeah.
And, that then has afforded me to make these decisions and to get the outsourced help that I need to enable me to do all of the things. Like right now, as we're having this podcast, my son's with a nanny. So they've gone for a lovely walk to the park. That's a privileged position that I'm in, to be able to afford to have that as a result of the choices that I've made. And I think we all have a level of choice. We can all choose our own reality. And, whether or not that means that you can make the same decisions that I can make, but there will be decisions that are available to you for you to be able to make different choices and different selections that will give you some level of freedom in your life. I believe that everyone has that opportunity. It's just the varying degrees of what that looks like.
I remember, this was maybe a few weeks ago, I read something that says we're not seeking peace of mind, we're seeking peace from mind, which I thought was a lovely way of putting it. And the reason I'm that clicked was because I remember, again, it was the Stephen Covey course 25, 30 odd years ago that I attended. And it was just a change in language from I have to I choose to. And even if I do have a job that I have to go to 9 to 5 because it pays the bills and and it doesn't feel like there's choice, even that switch in mindset from, well, I have to go to work, to, okay, I choose to go to work. Just that slight shift, despite the having to, seems to make a difference for some people.
I think it does. I think there's a really big thing in language. And Mojo Crow actually said something similar. He said, it's not that you have to, it's that you get to. I don't have to go and pick up my kids from school. I get to go and pick up my kids to school. And, I don't have to spend time with my wife. I get to spend time with my wife. It's just, even the inflection that comes from using that different language, it elevates that, that subconscious feeling of, the emotion that you attach to that task or activity that comes with it. And I think mindset has a huge amount to do with, how we feel about everything. And our language has a lot to do with that mindset shift. And, just being very careful about the words that we choose to use and the language that we get to use can have a very big impact on how we start to feel about ourselves and how we start to feel about our world. And, we're all fortunate to be able to work if we can, because that means we're getting to contribute and we're getting paid for our contribution, which then enables us to go and invest that money back into our families, or however we choose to do that. These are all very amazing things that we get, and we're getting to do those things as opposed to having to do them.
Yeah, I love that. I love the simple, yet for me, profound distinctions in going from I have to I get to. That is a beautiful distinction. And where it takes me is, because I get to, you could argue there's always someone worse off than us, despite our situation. That's probably not true for the last person, but there's always someone worse off than us, which means there's, this image of there's always someone better too. So we're somewhere in this hierarchy of to some degree. But for going from I have to I get to takes me to a place. So what is me getting to contribute to? So even if I'm pumping petrol, even if I'm making sandwiches in some warehouse in Western Sydney for the planes that other people are getting to fly off to holiday from, I get to, it might just open up the possibility of me thinking about the contribution that I'm making, however small or minute.
Yeah.
Which again, doesn't change my wages. It doesn't change necessarily, I'm up at 3 to get there for 4, all the trials and tribulations of that. But it might just soften the I have to I get to.
I think a lot of that comes back to purpose. And this is a big piece of the work that I do with the organizations I work with, is really getting clear on what the purpose of those organizations are and how do we align that with the individual purpose of the employees. Because when you get that alignment, that's when you're getting that buy-in, and that's when we get that connectivity. And the famous one is the janitor who was working at NASA when JFK came to visit. The janitor's there mopping the floor, and JFK says to him, what are you doing here? And he's like, I'm helping to put a man on the moon, Mr. President.
Yeah.
And it's like, he's the janitor, but he could see that the contribution that he was making was actually having an impact on those other people within, he was a link in the chain. And he could see the end game. He had line of sight to what they were trying to achieve at a organizational level, and he could see his place in the ability for that to happen. And I think that's true for the person who is working at the service station, or who's helping put those people on a plane, is that without your contribution, that wouldn't happen. And those people wouldn't be able to travel because they wouldn't have fuel, or they wouldn't be able to get on their dream holiday because, you didn't put the bags on the plane, or, you're all contributing to somebody's experience somewhere of making their dreams and their reality come true. And in return, it's helping you feel your own reality. And, when you talked about earlier about, I have to go to work, I think that in itself is a choice. If you don't enjoy the job that you're doing, go and find another job that aligns more closely with where you want to be and where you feel like you actually have that contribution and that, I don't know, I suppose it's, that emotional reward that you get from making that contribution. I think that's a choice we all definitely get to have. Yeah.
I think inadvertently, depending on our level of awareness, we're making choices all day, every day about all things.
Yeah.
And just, putting people back into cause as opposed to effect. If I'm going to switch it and go the other end of the scale, and, we're both business owners, entrepreneurs, my guess is that your plate's a little bit more fulleth than mine at the moment. How would you help entrepreneurs get that balance? Because despite, as you said, and we both know, it's the dream of running your own business, boy, it's 24/7. Taking holidays, whilst it's an enormous privilege, it's a big decision. Certainly for me, if I'm not there, I don't get paid. And so how go the other end of the scale, how would you help entrepreneurs get that balance between I have to I get to?
This is a really interesting conversation on that one as well, because, I got to take 2 weeks off when I had my baby. So my mat leave was all of 2 weeks long. Fortunately, I could then return to work with my baby though, and I could work from home part of the time and in the office part of the time. Like, I had flexibility around how I could make that work. But I didn't have the luxury of taking 12 months off for mat leave. Like, I'd effectively would have needed to shut my business for that period of time. So I think it's about being really cognizant of what your choices are and understanding what the trade-offs are. Like, there's pros and cons that come with everything. And part of the work that I do with coaching other business owners is getting them to actually get very clear on those foundational pieces. And the program that I run, called Live a Life by Design, is really aimed at helping entrepreneurs and business owners to get the clarity of that foundational level. Because if you aren't clear on what you want from your own life, where your purpose is, what your values are, what you want your life to actually look like, what are you working towards, your business will just be all over the shop. you'll have lack of clarity in your business. You'll take on projects that you aren't aligned with, that don't fill your cup. You'll become resentful. You'll get pulled in a million different directions. You'll feel like you're burning yourself out because you're trying to please all of these people and you're failing to please yourself. And I'm talking about this from experience because that was me. So, we all learn from those mistakes. And now I'm working to help others avoid making those mistakes too, by showing them this framework of laying this foundation so that they've got that clarity to move forward. And, and as I said, it's always going to be a pro and a con. You're not always going to get it perfect. There are going to be things that you're going to have to do that you don't want to do. But for the most part, you can then also start to realize and, look at that and go, well, if I don't want to do that, what's the alternative? What can I do to change that? And maybe you can and maybe you can't. But at least then you've got the awareness to kind of address that, go, this is what I really would like. How can I make some shifts, some tweaks? Can I outsource part of my business? Can I bring in more team members? Do I just cut that piece of my business off and not do that anymore? What are those opportunities to really realign your business to where you want it to be? I think that's really critical to get that piece right, because otherwise you're just chasing bright, shiny things. And I'm very good at that too.
Yeah, I think we all are.
Yeah.
We all are. One of the questions I ask my clients is, when I ask them about the results that they're creating or the results that have happened, whatever it is, I'll say, despite or because of you. And you can almost every time see them go into some transderivational search going, what? I don't even understand the question. Because some of our results are created, luck, timing, circumstance, right place, right time, yada, yada, yada. Others are because the market's gone up or down, or the interest rates have gone up or down, or this client showed up, or, blah, 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 blah. The extent to which we can shift them to creating the results because of them as opposed to despite them, I think for me, it's a really empowering part of the work I do. It's never going to be 100%, but it should be, we're trying to increase the because of us, not despite us.
Yeah.
Do you have a view on that?
I like that distinction. And I think it's really important because, as you said, there are things that happen to us because of external factors.
Yep.
We then have a choice, though, how we respond to that. Again, coming back to Stephen Covey and circle of influence and control. It's like, well, what is within my influence and my control and what's not? What do I need to kind of just accept? Yep. And if it is within my circle of influence and my circle of control, what steps can I take to leverage that or shift it or change it, depending on where I want to head? And I think that context of, is it despite me? That's a really interesting piece for leaders to kind of reflect on and go, well, what was my role in this outcome? Positively, negatively, whatever the outcome was. Yep. What did I do to contribute to that situation? And how could I positively do it again, or negatively act in a different way or do something differently to change the result should it come up again?
Yeah. That's another question that I got. I can't remember who I got it from, but I've used it many times, where particularly in challenging situations, when people are, arguing against the reality they're facing, results, team, whatever it might be, the question around, how am I contributing to a situation I say I don't want? And it's a really confronting question. And the answer isn't 100%, but it's probably not 0%. So somewhere in the middle, I might be contributing 2%, 5%, whatever, the number's arbitrary, but it's to get them to shift from effect to cause to some degree. Yeah. And again, a little bit of transderivational searching goes on when you ask that question. How am I contributing to a situation I say I don't want? It's like, oh, well, I'm not. Well, hang on, I must be in some way, it always takes two.
I think we always are.
Yeah.
There's a little bit, and it's behavioral, and it may not even be intentional. And asking that question again brings awareness to those, those situations, because you start thinking and you go, oh, actually, when I said that, or when I did that, or when I enabled that, that's all actually contributing to that situation.
Yeah. It might be 3 dominoes ago, but it's still the first domino.
Yeah.
Melissa, I'm interested if you'd be willing to share. I feel in a very different situation to you, as in I'm white, I'm middle-aged. I've had many privileges just because of that. What trade-offs have you had to make as a working mum?
A few.
Yes. Yes.
I mean, I think the obvious ones are that, and luckily this is changing. So this is quite generalized in what I'm about to say. So I'll preface it with that. But typically the mother is the carer, which means that they are the one who's responsible for taking time off work, time away from their career to nurture and raise that small child, at least for the first few months of their life. That is something that, many dads don't get the opportunity to do even. I know my husband wanted to have that opportunity, but it wasn't available to him because of where he was working. So those situations definitely impact us. That I think has shifted, and predominantly because I think of my own situation and the fact that I do run my own business, I have been able to restructure my business to suit my situation. And again, I suppose in some ways, this is my third child too. And if I reflect on how things were 12 years ago with my first child, very different situation and very different response to, childcare or bringing her to work or, how all of that looked. So with my 4-year-old, I set up a nursery in our office. She'd come to work with me. We had the nanny on site. That was in the days where we all went to work Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. And she came with me. And wherever I went, she went. This time it's a bit different. Like I only go into the office when I need to. The nanny's with me. So I've had to make those shifts and changes, but I've also then had to educate people around me around when I am available, when I'm not available, why I might not be available. What I can do and what I can't do because of the situation that I'm in with my children. And that has an impact on how much I travel. It has an impact on, where I can do work and, how quickly I can respond to something. So there's definitely been all of those sorts of challenges that have come with that. But I think coming back to that, I get to is, I'm getting to set an example for other people in our industry to show how you can do what I'm doing and still have a family, because something that I noticed in the design and architecture industry is we lose so many women to families who don't return, because it's a huge number. And it's because of that thing I spoke about earlier about the pressure and the stress and the deadlines that come with, project-driven work, is that they can't juggle it all. They can't be there on site and they can't be there in the office, as much as is required of some of those working conditions. So that is something that I've worked, quite closely with to try and, shift in my own team, was employing women with children, giving them flexibility. But even then, if you've got 3 kids and you're trying to hold down a full-time job and you're the primary carer, that is very much a different stress load. And so, some of my good friends are now pursuing other alternative careers where they can work from home and use their skill sets that they've got from the industry, but aren't being, they're not under the same stress and pressure that they had from being in the industry. So it's a really sad thing. And I don't have the answers to it. I've tried a few different ways to deal with it, finding the nanny on site for my staff as well. And it's a mental load that we're carrying that certainly does have an impact on our ability to stay in the workforce.
And what about, and I feel completely unqualified and I can't answer this, how about the single mums? Who, for whatever circumstance, don't have the support, family close or partner close, or they are the primary carer, the primary breadwinner, the primary everything for that child or children. Is there anything we can offer, any counsel, any hope for them?
I think that's a really tough situation. And I myself was in that situation for a period of time. It actually coincided with the start of my business. So I was part-time single mum, starting up my business. And, again, though, I was fortunate enough to have access to daycare and those sorts of things. And you really do need a support network around you, whether it's friends, whether it's external outsourced help, any way that you can get that. And again, I do realize that that's another privileged position that I was able to afford to have. But it's creating those networks of support around you. And, my favorite saying is it takes a village to raise a child. And it really does. And whether you pay that village or you find that village, you need those people around you, because it's a tough gig. And when you're working and you're trying to raise children and you're trying to be there for every, school event that's going on, or, the cross country day, and, there's this expectation that you will be the best possible business owner and the best possible mum. And that's a bloody big load to carry.
Huge.
And that's probably the thing that I've realized the most in the last few months, and having a chat with a number of other female entrepreneurs who are also having children as well, is that that's a conversation we've been having a lot of, is that, in some of the circles that we swim in, is we are in these very, large business groups with very successful men. And when we're sitting at the table with them, there's an expectation that we are going to be the best possible business owner that we can possibly be. But at the same time, we're going to be the best possible wife and mother that their wives are as well. And it's like, there's 2 full-time jobs that we're being expected to hold here. And that's a bloody lot.
It is.
And so this is where I think as women, we start to feel compromised, that we're never actually fully achieving our potential in either space, because we're kind of doing both at half mast a little bit. And I think that's where we need to cut ourselves some slack and just go, look, again, I get to be a professional woman and run my own business, but I also get to be a mum. And that means that what that looks like for me is going to be very different to what that looks like for you or any other person that I might encounter. And I think that, sorry, I'm rambling here.
No, I think it's really interesting.
I think this is where it comes back to us determining our own meaning of success, what that definition of success is for each of us. And again, this is something that I've been mulling over for the last sort of 2 years as well. And again, I think the pandemic probably sparked a lot of this, is like, well, what is success? And is my definition of success the same as yours and Joe's and Billy's? Because we all have different circumstances, different situations, different gender biases, all sorts of things, different responsibilities. What does my definition of success look like? And am I just trying to live up to someone else's definition of success? And if so, what would mine look like if I could get to choose? And guess what? I do get to choose. So how do I want that to look? So that's been probably a very personal journey that I've been going on for the last 2 years, is really redefining what my idea of success is, and how I've been letting societal constructs or ideas of others or, business groups determine and tell me what success should be for me.
That's a really, for me, it's an interesting, and for me personally, confronting choice, because one of the advantages, I think, of all the stuff that's online is we get to see other possibilities. Certainly when I was growing up, the village was the street next door. That was it. And that was my only comparison. So it was a very limited, constricted view of what's possible. On the 9 o'clock news, which was the only broadcast of the day, you got to see, Armstrong go to the moon. You got to see world events and perhaps get inspired. Nowadays, it's the flick of a switch. It's a scroll. It's the next picture. We're always, this constant bombardment, I think, of living your best life. Now, contrast that with what you've just said, and I don't get it because it's not my situation, but I can see why you would. How do you live your best possible life as a mum and a carer, and your best possible life as a professional businesswoman? Those two things aren't necessarily congruent at the best level. So how do you navigate, without saying it's not the best, because it probably is under the circumstances, how do you navigate that one notch down from the best mum you can be and the best entrepreneur you can be? Because like you say, you probably can't do both, but you're doing, it's like this DNA helix, the best of both as I can, whenever I can with what I've got. How do you navigate those two almost challenging paradoxes?
With great difficulty. It's probably the simple answer. I think there's an ebb and a flow that comes with this, and it's about being really clear and very conscious about where is the best use of my time, and where can I make the biggest impact in both worlds. So as a mum, what are my non-negotiables? Where am I going to absolutely show up? What do I need to be there for and what can I potentially let go of? Do I need to be at every school carnival, or are there critical ones that I need to be at? Having those conversations then with my kids as well, when they're old enough to understand, is like, I can be here for this and I can come to that, but I can't be there for this. And this is why. So I think there's a lot of, there's a bit of soul searching that needs to happen in that to be able to have that clarity about, what are those important moments that matter for our kids, and being there for those. And, likewise with my son, I spent, we've only just hired the nanny. He's 4 months old now. So I've made sure that I was around, juggling the 100 things so that I was there. Whereas now he's a bit older, it's like, okay, well, what are the moments that matter with him? And it's playtime and, feeding and those sorts of things. So having that balance in that space. And then I think from a work perspective, it's really then comes back to what I said earlier, is about being really clear on who it is that you want to work with and who it is that you want to be serving and aligning with, and not saying yes to everything, because it's the old 80-20 rule again. 80% of your results come from 20% of your clients. Go back, analyze who are those 20% of clients and focus hard on those. And maybe it means you're not doing the same volume of work and the same volume of projects, but the impact that you're making is significantly greater because you're honed in, so clearly on your niche. And again, niching is something that I've discovered over time, because I thought, I'm a designer, I do something for everybody. No. I'm a workplace dynamic strategist, and I work with commercial workplaces, and I work with businesses that are in this range, who are professional services firms, who have an investment in their people, who have aligned behaviors, they have clear sense of purpose. Like, once you know those things, you know who your perfect client is, and you can be very specific and very targeted about that. And then I think that enables you to help get some of that noise to fall away, so you can be very conscious about what that looks like. And then there's the juggle that comes in the between, because you know exactly what you want, and it's just like, there's only so many hours in a day. What can I actually do?
Yeah. I'm going to pick up on your idea around moments that matter, because I agree, and I'm going to share a story that might indicate sometimes we don't know the moments that matter. And it was actually only maybe 10 years ago. My eldest daughter was in her teens. She'd never really taken to milk. And it's a ridiculous story, but you'll hopefully see the point in a second. And we kept, why don't you like milk? Why don't you like milk? And eventually her awareness came to the point. She realized that when she was something like 3, she came downstairs in the morning, because she was bottle fed. And my wife was feeding our son, who was 4 months, sitting in the dark, feeding Callum. And my wife simply said to my daughter, "Oh, go and get your milk. It's in the fridge." Now, there was no intention, there was no lack of love, there was no, you could argue nothing happened. And yet in that moment, my daughter decided, "I don't like milk." Now, the milk's inconsequential. It doesn't really matter to some degree. Nutritionally, you could argue it's not a bad thing anyway. However, I wonder how many moments that matter we're just not even aware of. That we've no idea that someone has made meaning from that interaction, that comment, that statement between you and someone else, including them, that there are many, if not as much, moments that matter that we're not even aware of. We're unconscious to them.
I think that's a really good point. And I think there's probably quite a number, and particularly when they're young and at that influential age, and it's just an off-the-cuff comment, We had a similar conversation with my 4-year-old, is that she had to give up her bottles when the baby brother came along because he needed the bottles. So all of a sudden there's probably some resentment there because he took my bottles away. So, and she refuses to drink milk as well now because it's not in a bottle. So it's really interesting. And I think, as they get older, like I can actually have, very intelligent conversations with my 12-year-old now. And there's a book that I've read, and it's the 5 love languages. I don't know if you're aware of the 5 love languages.
Yes.
Kids have them too. We use them at work. We try and find out what are the love languages of our team, so that we can, fill their cup that way. But our kids have them too. And my 12-year-old daughter's love language is quality time. So I would ask her at the end of a weekend, what was the best thing about the weekend? And, we've been to the beach, we've done all these things. She said to me, I was sitting on the couch watching TV with you last night, and you know, we cuddled up together and watched TV. And it's like, they are the simplest and the easiest things for us to do, but sometimes as busy parents, they're the last thing that we actually do. We're too busy trying to create big moments that matter and experiences of memories, when they are actually the little memories that really count. So I think just having a conversation with them when they're a little bit bigger, you can't understand that. But yeah, I take your point. When they're little, who knows what meaning they're making from some of those things.
I know. I've read that, you know, it's inevitable. We'll screw them up. Our job is to screw them up as least as we can.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll hear about it later.
Melissa, because this is in my camp too, I'm surrounded by, you know, family and friends and kids. We've talked a lot about being a working mum. What about the people that are listening, perhaps, that don't have kids or don't want kids, and that's not their choice, or maybe they would like to, but they can't. So not about the kids thing necessarily. Do you have any counsel for them or tips about how they might go around balancing the needs that they have with, you know, working full time?
I don't think it's any different. I think it's still about being really clear on what it is that you want from your life personally. And you know, whether you've got kids or whether you don't, you've still got aspirations, you've got dreams, you've got adventures that you want to fulfill. I think it's just having the clarity around what does that look like. And again, you know, as I spoke about earlier, that, you know, being really intentional about what you want to do with your life and laying that foundation will then enable you to use your business, your work, your job, you know, whatever context that is. It's a vehicle. And that took me a long time to realize, like, myself and my business were so intertwined that, you know, I was my business and my business was me. And extracting that and realizing that my business is purely a vehicle to enable those things to happen. It's the thing that generates my income. It's the thing that gives me the opportunity to contribute. It's an external thing. Like, I'm still me, and I still have things that I want from my life and the person I want to be. That is separate. And I think that's having that distinguished separation and understanding that then enables you to make much more clearer choices and purposeful, intentional choices around what you do with your business or your career or your job.
Yeah. Let me, if I may, ask you some personal counsel then, because that's one of the biggest struggles I face, is this conscious and probably more unconscious connection with the work I do being what I'm worth. What process or what work did you do to help make the distinction?
Lots of little things, I think. And, you know, it's not an easy thing, because when my business was going really well, I was like, yay, things are great. I'm great. When things are shit, it's like, oh, I'm shit. And so last year I had 3 different business coaches, all teaching me different things. One at a very functional business level, sounding board, someone I could just talk through things with. I had another at more of I suppose you'd say a spiritual level. So she was working on like emotional healing and deeper ingrained, you know, trauma, sense of worth, purpose, those sorts of things. And then I had another, you know, mastermind business group where I could see, you know, aspirationally how I could restructure parts of my business and grow different aspects. Each of those things gave me a very different lens and a very different perspective on value of myself and my business, and helping to just kind of separate that. And it's not an easy thing, and I don't think I've got a simple answer, and there's no sort of magic formula that I followed, but it's kind of just teasing that apart and realizing that, you know, the business is one thing and there's only so much that I can do to influence it and control it, and there's other things that are external to that, like we talked about, market conditions, etc., that make that happen. And it's been a bit of a process. And it's about that definition of success as well. Like I was defining what success was based on external factors again, and I had to redefine what that definition of success was, both for the business and then for me, because I needed to start treating us as 2 different things. Part of that also, I think, was I have created more of a personal brand as well in separation to the business, so that I had this, I reclaimed my own identity, I suppose, through that. So with writing the book and having my podcast and doing online programs, that was enabling me to have a sense of worth in myself that was purely me. And then the business was a collective of people that came together to deliver on projects. And that was something that was separate. And I think that helped me a lot, because I felt like at some point I had been so deeply ingrained in the business that there wasn't that ability to separate us. Whereas now there's like these two independent parties, but we work collectively and collaboratively together.
Right. Well, thank you. I look forward to the day when that's the case for me. It doesn't feel like that.
It's a tricky one. And I took a lot of external counsel on that as well. So yeah, I think that helps.
And I'm gonna guess, I guess I'm hoping for this too, that it's not any one thing, but it's a number of things. A number of seeds get planted, and you pick a little bit from here and a little bit from there, and that question from there, and this from that. And the counsel I've been given is it still has to have some signature of your own.
Yes.
So like you're saying, the definition of success, whether it's material or immaterial, whether it's hard or soft, what's Pete Clark's stamp? What's Melissa Marsden's stamp on that? And that might change. Now you've got a 4-year-old son, or a child that's no longer at school, or when the business is doing this, or when the business is doing that. That might be, that might change.
I think it's definitely an evolution. Like, I'm not the same person I was 4 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago. Like, I think we're constantly evolving, and to think that we kind of figure it out and that's it, I think is a little bit short-sighted. I think that it's something that continues to change, and what works right now for me probably won't work for me in 6 months' time. And it's that constant evolution and reflection to readapt and to shift and to pivot and to change to suit where you want to be heading. But yeah, it's definitely wasn't one thing. It was a collective of things, and it's a collective of conversations as well. Hearing other people's stories and going, oh, well, that bit could work for me. And like you said, it's collecting all these ideas and thoughts. I call myself a big sponge. I will seek counsel from all these people, soak it all up, and then I distill it and go, okay, well, this is what feels authentic and real for me. Like, this is what I feel like I can own, and this is how I think I can move forward. But it's, collating all of those ideas from a broad variety of people as well. And that's the diversity of thinking is a really big one. Making sure that we're getting lots of different perspectives. And I think that, listening to podcasts and going to conferences, those sorts of things really spark so much creative ideas in my brain about what the possibility and the potential is, and sort of moving forward from that.
I'm intrigued to know if you are able to share the clues that tell you you're not the same person you were 4 years ago.
Oh yeah.
How do you know?
I think as a person, I'm far calmer. I know my triggers now, and I know when I'm, or I'm in that state of stress or flight or overwhelm, and I now have the tools available to myself, and I know how to bring myself back. And I think, we all get to that state. So it's knowing how to manage it. And I think I feel far more comfortable now about saying no to things that I don't think work well for me. And I've got a language and a toolkit of how to say no respectfully, and, but maintaining that sense of truthfulness to myself, I think, as well. So I think a lot of it comes down to how I inherently feel about myself, and how I feel like I'm showing up, and the contribution that I'm making, and, the way that I am with my family, and the way that I am in my business. I think all of those things, they feel better. They feel more real. They feel much more calm and smooth. There's definitely less pointy bits.
Yeah. And for me, this is not a criticism at all. It's a little bit generic, but I get so much how even just the comment, it just feels better. Is so powerful, so empowering, because that is like this the umbrella term that means, there's less pointy bits.
Yeah. It's not so sharp around the edges anymore.
Which is cool. And look, Melissa, I'm so grateful for your time. Before we finish, I'm going to ask you some really quick, hopefully easy to answer questions. If people want to get hold of you, how do they do that?
If you head over to my website, which is melissamarsden.com.au, you can find me and my contact details there, or come and connect with me on LinkedIn. I hang out there quite a bit. Or I'm on Instagram at Melmar, MELMAR.
Okay, cool. And we'll put all those in the show notes as we produce this. So thank you. So Melissa, are you night in or night out?
Night in.
Sunrise or sunset?
Sunset.
Okay. The last movie that made you cry?
It'd be a kids movie, absolutely.
Any of the Disney movies.
Disney has a way of making you pull on those heartstrings. And which one was it? I don't know. It was one of the kids' ones recently, and I just got a bit teary. The music does it for me. So emotional.
Yeah, the music is. Yeah, they're supposedly making them for kids, but actually, I think there's some adult messages in there too.
Absolutely, yes.
What's a maxim you live your life by?
Life's short, so for F's sake, do what makes you happy.
And are there any rules you like to break?
Probably all of them within reason.
Well, given our conversation started with freedom.
Yeah, I think there's a few rules that I tend to like to break, just in terms of shifting the status quo. I like to argue the point instead of just doing what we've always done. It's like question a lot of things there.
Okay. And maybe one final question. What's a book that's changed your life?
I'm looking at my bookshelf here, and there's so many. The one that I think has made the biggest impact on me in the last few years is Super Attractor by Gabby Bernstein, which again is kind of a bit more in that spiritual realm. But if you take some of the woo-woo away from the message that's in that, a lot of it is around mindset. And again, big lessons in that around getting to choose and reframing situations. They were probably the biggest takeaways that I took out of that book. Great.
We'll put that in the show notes too.
Wonderful.
Melissa, thank you so much for taking time out from your very busy entrepreneurial life. And I'm grateful the nanny was able to take your son on a lovely walk around the park. It's been lovely chatting, and thank you.
It's been wonderful. I really enjoyed it. Thanks so much for having me, Pete.
You're welcome.